What is a family, anyway? They're just people who make you feel less alone and really loved. And that's what you've done for me. Thank you for being my family.
You know what? You got spunk.
Well,
I hate spunk.
Hi, guys.
Rhoda, chocolate solves nothing.
No, cottage cheese solves nothing. Chocolate can do it all.
You don't know what loneliness is. You get into bed with Lars.
I had to. I could put a bed in it.
If you had to, you could put a bed on a motorcycle.
I've been around. Well, all right, I might not have been around, but I've been nearby.
Hello, I'm film historian Tony Maietta.
And I'm Brad Shreve, who's just a guy who likes movies.
We discuss movies and television from Hollywood's golden age. We go behind the scenes and share our opinions, too.
And of course, being the average guy, my opinions are the ones that matter.
As does your self-delusion. Welcome to Going Hollywood.
Tony, I didn't tell you this, but last year I binge-watched all 168 episodes of The Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Oh my God.
Yeah, when you said let's do it, I didn't bat an eye. I'm like, let's watch again. But I'm more than happy to dive into Mary Tyler Moore anytime.
That's awesome. It wasn't even a pandemic. What was the point? Why did you just want to watch them all?
I am not a huge TV watcher when it comes to present-day TV.
Yeah.
I tend to go behind. Like, I am just now starting Schitt's Creek. I don't know why that is. I tend to go back more to older shows.
Future episode.
And eventually catch up.
Yeah, I love that. That's so funny.
Yep. I haven't seen 30 Rock. I haven't seen Game of Thrones. Really no desire to see Games of Thrones, but that's the way it was. So, I don't know. We don't do a whole lot of banter in the beginning, but how was your week?
It was great. And you know why it was great?
Why was it great?
Because I spent some time with some long-lost family members, namely Mary and Rhoda and Ted and Phyllis and Sue Ann and Murray. Poor Murray's always last. No, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that you binge-watched it, because I've been like, it's kind of like my life. I've binge-watched this show my entire life. When I was acting, I used to try to find monologues, and I actually wrote a monologue, a very funny monologue, actually, of how my earliest memory of life was the first episode of The Mary Tyler Moore Show. And then I realized that it was starting to age me as I got older, and people started to do the math. So I changed it to be like a summer rerun. Then it was Nick at Night. And then it was TV Land, and it was just ludicrous because it was like, okay, yeah, all right. But anyway, yeah, it was partly true too. I can remember seeing Rhoda out on the balcony cleaning that window at the very, very beginning of the very first episode.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
I barely remembered it. I remembered her going in and talking to Mr. Grant, but I didn't remember details at all. And, I think Time Magazine, I think it was in the top 10. Yeah, no, it was the top 10 best first episodes of all time.
Which is crazy because it was a disaster up until the final filming. I mean, that's kind of legendary. Did you know those stories about it? I know some of them. They didn't do a pilot because CBS automatically ordered 13 episodes. They wanted to work with Mary Tyler Moore, so they didn't have to do a pilot. But they did do this tape in an office building of just the office scene between Mary and Lou to send to affiliates to give them an idea, and it was disastrous. And then they did a run through, and they filmed that on a Tuesday night, and it was a bomb. It was a bomb. Nobody laughed. It was a disaster. And Mary Tyler Moore was crying on the way home, and Grant Tinker, her husband at the time, and also the head of MTM, and who put this all together, called Alan Burns and James L. Brooks, and all he said was, fix it. And they did by adding one line They added one line to the pilot. Do you know what that line is?
I'm going to guess the spunk.
No, that was always in it.
Oh,
that was always in it. But Edward Asner...
I hate spunk.
Edward Asner was such a heavy dramatic actor that he kept overhitting it. It was very difficult for him to do that. No, they realized they liked their script, and there was really nothing they could change. The only thing they could possibly change was the character of Rhoda was not getting a good reaction. People were immediately alienated by Rhoda.
And she was kind of harsh that first episode.
She was harsh. But Marge Mullen, who was the script supervisor, said, why don't you have the little girl, Bess, say that she likes Rhoda, thereby giving the audience permission to like Rhoda. So when she says, Aunt Rhoda's really a lot of fun, Mom hates her, that was the only line that was put in, and it completely changed the tenor of the character. The eventual filming of the pilot, the first episode that you mentioned, went over like gangbusters the next time. Isn't that crazy?
It's pretty amazing how one small little thing like that can make such a big difference.
And it was such a smart, they didn't have to make big changes. They added one line to have the audience identify with this character and give the audience permission to like her. If this little girl likes her, she can't be that bad.
I mean, thinking of other shows, she could have easily been erased from the show, or Valerie Harper could have been replaced.
Well, it was a very controversial character, you know, because, I mean, I don't know if you've heard this too, that's when James L. Brooks and Alan Burns, who created the Mary Tyler Moore Show, first had a meeting with CBS about it. Mary's character, Mary Richards, was a divorcee.
Yeah, I knew that.
Which totally, you know, the suits at CBS were like, oh my God, people are going to think she divorced Dick Van Dyke, which is the stupidest thing.
I'm like, how dumb do they think the American public is? I mean, it was 4 years later, which is pretty amazing.
But there was one of those research people in the meeting, and he said that the American public does not like divorced people, people with mustaches, Jews, or people from New York. Those were the four things they had to avoid. And of course, the show ended up giving them all four at one point or another. But that's just how stupid.
Well, right up front, they had a Jew from New York.
Exactly. So they didn't listen to that, but they made...
Which I was really surprised to learn that Valerie Harper's not Jewish.
She's not Jewish. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, that is funny.
She was Catholic. And she was not, she's from California. She lived in New Jersey. And she based her characterization on her stepmother, who was very New York, but Italian New York. So sometimes Valerie Harper, if she fought very hard, first of all, her dialect is impeccable, but she fought very hard for it not to be Italian New York and make it Jewish New York. Nancy Walker's Irish. How about that? The ultimate Jewish mother is Irish. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves.
That's funny. I want to put this show in context. Mm-hmm. Because we think of it as groundbreaking for many reasons. And usually it's called groundbreaking because you had a single woman getting out on her own. Thank God this was one show where she wasn't constantly looking for a man. That was new. But really, when I look at the time period, it's pretty amazing. Like I said, it was 1970 when this came out.
Correct.
That was only 4 years after Dick Van Dyke Show.
66, yeah.
She was still an up-to-date housewife, so she wasn't a traditional sitcom housewife, but...
she wore pants.
Yeah, but that was still
famously.
Her position was still as a housewife. Now, granted, Dick Van Dyke was groundbreaking in the sense that probably, if not the first time that really jumped out, that you had a show that was half work and half home that worked. Like Fathers Knows Best, did we ever know what the guy did when he went off to work? I don't think so.
I don't think I've ever seen an episode of Fathers Knows Best.
You kind of be grateful. Anyway, so we had that short amount change in 4 years. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you probably know Fred Silverman took over CBS in 1970. And he did what was called the Rural Purge. Are you familiar with the Rural Purge?
The Rural Purge, yes.
In 1971, he wiped out hit shows, as a matter of fact. You had Green Acres, Mayberry RFD, Hee Haw. There's another one.
Beverly Hillbillies,
and I think Petticoat Junction.
Yes.
Which got pretty shitty at that point anyway.
Yeah.
But they were hit shows be like, these shows aren't bringing us the right audience for good advertising. And he wanted CBS to grow up. And so you had Mary Tyler Moore, and then about 6 months later, you had All in the Family.
That's one of the more fortuitous things about this show. This show had a lot of good luck. And that was one of the things, the fact that actually Mike Dan, who was the original head of programming at CBS, left. He's the one who was behind all of those rural sitcoms. He left, and Bob Woods came in. And Bob Woods hired Fred Silverman. And they're the ones who said, we want this network to go in a different direction. We want the sophisticated, urban, younger viewers. And they just happened to have a show, which, by the way, was slotted by Mike Dan into a death time slot of like Tuesday between Hee Haw and I don't know, some other show. It was after Hee Haw. Can you believe Hee Haw was on primetime television? Like a death time slot. Fred Silverman saw it and said, this is the show we're trying to, this is the show kind of shows we want on CBS. Let's move it out of this death time slot so it has an opportunity to actually gain some traction. And he was instrumental in moving it to Saturday night, which, you know, of course, was the linchpin of that legendary Saturday night lineup of the mid-'70s, which I remember incredibly well, of All in the Family, MASH, Mary Tyler Moore, Bob Newhart, and Carol Burnett. It was like a dream lineup. So it's amazing that the good luck that this show had in getting it on the air was amazing.
It just blows my mind to think of a network saying, and granted, now the shows, the rural shows were not at their height, but they were still doing pretty well. So for a network to say, you know what, these shows are doing well, but we're done with them, and wipe them clean. I mean, it boggles the mind. It does.
It would never happen today. It would never happen today. It never happened before. It never happened since. It was truly unprecedented what they did that allowed these shows that changed the face of television, All in the Family and Mary Tyler Moore, in the same year. You know, All in the Family was 71, January of 71, another show that had a hell of a time getting on the air, but did.
Oh, yeah.
And Mary Tyler Moore, and then they changed the face of television for the 70s. It's an amazing story, which I would love to go into the history in because that's what I love to do, but we're going to start losing people. I may as well start singing if we're going to do that.
Love it. Well, are you going to sing the season 1 version or the season 2 on?
How will you make it? What's funny is that they changed it. Isn't that funny how they changed it? Because they realized.
Well, I'm glad they did. The first season was kind of a downer.
It was, yeah. It's not the.
How will you make it on your own?
They're like, you know what? Let's just say she made it
this time.
They said, let's just say she made it. let's just give her the benefit of the doubt.
Well, yeah, but it's also
this world is awfully.
It's how will you make it on your own? This time, girl, you're all alone. Something like that. And that's not what everybody remembers. Everybody remembers the upbeat.
Everybody remembers who can turn the world on with a smile. You know, because it's so much nicer than that. How will you make it on your own? You know, you're all by yourself. Very depressing.
You might just make it after all. I mean,
you might just make it after all. Yeah, it's very funny. Yeah, it's very funny.
I mean, it just blows my mind. And who sang that song?
Sonny Curtis.
Sonny Curtis. Have you ever heard the Joan Jett and the Blackhearts version?
I have. Sonny Curtis was the shit-kicking country singer. He was one of Buddy Holly's Crickets. Isn't that funny?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. He urbaned up his voice to sing the theme song. He wrote it and he sang it.
He's actually very proud of it. I've seen some YouTube videos a while back of him singing that song.
It's a wonderful song. I mean, it fits it perfectly. It's so wonderful.
Yeah, when we watched it last year, Maurice said to me, he goes, is this the best theme song of all time? It's got to be close. And I said, yeah.
Damn close. Cheers.
Yeah.
I can think of Cheers as a great theme song.
Cheers is a great one.
And
there's
Friends.
Some others, but
yeah, but it's just, I throw that word iconic around all the time, but it is. It really is. It's so of its era. It's so, you hear that song, you immediately know it's Mary Tyler Moore. Immediately.
Now, when you were thinking about your old friends like Mary and Rhoda, et cetera, were you also enjoying your time with Hazel Frederick?
I don't know who that is.
You don't know Hazel Frederick?
No. Who's Hazel Frederick?
Other than Mary Tyler Moore, she's the only person that appeared in every single episode of the show.
Oh, of course, Hazel, yes, of course. The woman watching her throw her hat up in the air.
Yes.
I'm like, she's some weird extra person? How about that?
She wasn't an extra. She was a local person in Minneapolis. What they did is, she's a listener. She is the woman that wore the blue scarf, and when Mary throws her hat in the air, she's in the background of these. I think she has the cat eye glasses or something like that.
Scowling at Mary in the middle of the intersection, throwing her hat in the air. They
wanted it to look natural, so they hid the camera, and Mary ran out to that middle of that intersection and tossed her hat in the air. And I've heard her interviews. She said she just kind of like, what is that strange woman doing? And she kind of became like a local celebrity.
She did.
Once they tracked her down.
When she died, I remember it was on the news. I mean, that's the weirdest kind of seat of your pants celebrity, I think. It's amazing that just for that scowl that she gives her. Have you ever been to Minneapolis to see the statue that TV Land paid for?
No, I have not. I would love to see it.
It's a lot better than a lot of the Lucy statues, in which Lucy looks a little bit like gargantuan in some of these. The Mary one's good. The Mary one's good, but it is her at Nicollet Mall where they filmed that scene, tossing her beret in the air and ushering the era of the single woman.
I did look on Google Maps at the house where her studio, the Victorian house where her studio was located, that Phyllis owned, and I looked it up on the real estate ads.
2104 Kenwood Parkway.
Yes, man, they have really fixed it up nice.
I've been there several times.
Oh my gosh, why am I not surprised? Because if you watch on Mary, it's a very. I've always thought the house was great, but it has the chain link fence and it looks a little old. Man, it is gorgeous today.
It's a little rundown. It's a little rundown in the very first season. And of course, the famous stories about them going back to film A New Beginning, and the owner would not let them because she got tired of people knocking on her door asking to see Mary and Phyllis and Rhoda. So she famously hung, this was the time of Watergate, she famously hung impeach Nixon signs out Mary's window. So the producers had to pick a new house. And that's why the first episode that I'm going to talk about, which is the first episode of the 4th season, The Lars Affair, is the very first episode which suddenly Mary's moved. Mary and Rhoda have all moved. The house is completely different. It's kind of the same. There's still a turret for Rhoda to live in, and there's kind of a palladium window for Mary, but it's a different house.
I never noticed that.
What a great lead-in.
Yeah,
what a great lead-in.
That is.
And for my first episode. So Brad and I decided to do, look, it's kind of like picking, for me, I don't know the same for you, it's kind of like, it's not even picking your favorite child, because I wouldn't have 24 children. It was very difficult to pick 2 episodes to talk about for me, because I love this series so deeply. But I knew which 2 there were, because they're the 2 that I always go to. They're the 2 that I always think about, and I always laugh at, and that move me. So my first episode is from 1973, actually September 15th, 1973, and it's called The Lars Affair.
Tony, I'm stopping our conversation real quick.
Why? Brett, we're in the middle of a podcast.
But this is about the podcast, and it's very important.
Okay.
Listener, whatever app you're listening on, whether it's on the computer or on the phone, reach your finger or your mouse over. It usually says follow. Some still say subscribe. And click that. And what's going to happen when they do that, Tony?
They're going to get notified when a new episode is available, and they can listen to us again. You don't want to miss that.
No.
Can we get back to the episode that we were recording?
Of course.
Please?
Of course.
All right. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe and follow.
There you go.
Okay, so I think, well, I'm going to give a brief plot. So what happens is basically this episode, the reason I chose this episode, other than the fact that I love it, and it's so funny, is it's historic for so many reasons. Not the least of which being the first appearance of Sue Ann Nivens. Yes, Betty White's first appearance on the Mary Tyler Moore Show in The Lars Affair.
And it's hard to imagine that they went 3 seasons without her.
Isn't it amazing? But she came at the perfect time. This is another fortuitous thing about this show. Because you can kind of tell in the episode, Rhoda is slowly starting to spin off. The following year was Rhoda, was her own show. And so they brought Georgette in the year before, season 3, And having Sue Ann come in purely as a one-shot, it was a one-off. It was not going to be a recurring character. But Betty White blew the roof off the studio with this portrayal. So they like, we have to have her back. We have to have her back. So just at the perfect time, just as Rhoda is slowly making her way out, in comes Sue Ann Nivens to help pick up the slack, which I think is amazing. There's a couple amazing things about this show, and I said historic things. Not only Sue Ann Nivens, Cloris Leachman won a well-deserved Emmy for this performance. And it was written by Ed Weinberger, who only had recently joined the production team as a writer, and directed by the legendary Jay Sandrich, who was pretty much the primary director. He did, like, I think 19 episodes a year on Mary Tyler Moore, which would be more than the season now. But back then when you had like 23 shows, 19 of them. So another reason why I think it is an incredible episode is because it's also historic, because it plants the seeds of the eventual dissolution of Lou Grant's marriage. Because in the very first scene, he apologizes to Mary for the scene that his wife Edie caused by locking herself in the bathroom all night and then storming out and demanding a ride home from Murray's wife. So we already have the seeds planted of the end, which was a very tricky thing at that time. Divorce. What did we just say? CBS said no divorcees, no Jews, no one from New York, no one with a mustache. So they were already planting the seeds for the end of Lou's and Edie's marriage. But what makes this episode so incredible to me is the performance of Cloris Leachman. Cloris Leachman, okay, they used to call Cloris Leachman Cloris Brando because she was an actor studio. She was trained at the actor studio. She was the wild child. They never knew what she was going to do. They knew it would be gold, but they didn't know. She was very difficult to rein in. And in this episode, she gives us the ultimate Phyllis Lindstrom performance. If you don't know the plot, Betty White as Sue Ann Nivens is having an affair with Phyllis's husband, Lars. And everybody finds out about it. And that's pretty much the bones of the episode. Do you like this episode, Brad?
I didn't. I love that Sue Ann Nivens was introduced. She was almost right on target to how Sue Ann became. She was pretty close. So I was really impressed that right from the beginning, she was a little different, but for the most part, she had it. I was never a fan of Phyllis. Phyllis was, I love Cloris Leachman. I absolutely love Cloris Leachman. And I know Phyllis was supposed to be irritating. I didn't find her good irritating. Now, surprisingly, when she went and had her own show, Phyllis, I liked her in that, even though it died after 2 seasons. But right. Sometimes I liked her. I was hot and cold with Phyllis. Let me put it that way.
Right. Which I think is how she was designed.
Yes.
She was designed to be an aggravating character. And it's funny that you liked her when she had her own series because, of course, they had to soften her in order to get... That was one of the big problems, the big questions is how are we going to have this basically unlikable character, this aggravating character, be a lead of her series? So they had to soften her, which a lot of people say, is also what made the show not work. But, I mean, that's a debate.
Well, Lars died, so she was more vulnerable.
Exactly. And we don't know how Lars died. Let's talk about Lars for a minute.
Okay.
We never see Lars, ever, in the history of Mary Tyler Moore or, well, in Phyllis, he's dead, so we're definitely going to see him in Phyllis. We never see Lars. Lars is in the tradition of the great unseen television characters. Just to name a few, Mrs. Columbo, from the TV show Columbo, Jeffrey from Seinfeld, Stan Walker from Will and Grace, and here's one for you, Brad, Mrs. Theodore J. Mooney. We never meet Mrs. Mooney in the Lucy Show.
I never thought about it, but you're right. We have never seen Mrs. Mooney.
You never see Mrs. Mooney. You never see Juanita from the Andy Griffith Show. You never see Sheridan from Keeping Up Appearances. That wonderful show.
Now, Juanita was the operator. Is that right?
Juanita's the one, yes. Bonnie used to sing to her on the phone. He was always cheating on Thelma or seeing Juanita behind her back. So Lars Lindstrom is in the tradition of these great unseen characters because we knew so much about him in our head. We had such an image of him in our head that we knew if we ever saw him, it would be anticlimactic. I mean, that rarely ever works. And who's probably one of the most famous is Maris from Frasier. Again, the same way. It would have totally destroyed our idea of what Maris was had we seen her.
Oh, yeah.
We just got delicious hints about her.
And the fact that she was frail and sickly and then later she became very big and overweight would never have been as funny.
No, because we have this idea in our head of what she looks like. Same thing with Lars. So we know what Rhoda says about Lars. We know what Phyllis says about Lars. We have an idea of who Lars is. So what's so amazing about Cloris Leachman is that Cloris Leachman, as I said, was kind of like the wild child. She would do these things. She was always getting into it with director Jay Sandrich because she would go off on these, she was in her Brando-esque mode and she would find inspiration and she would go off on, she would never do the same blocking, which is death in a TV show. You have to do the same blocking. And Jay Sandrich would say, Cloris, that was wonderful. Only one problem. Nobody's going to see it because you're out of camera range. So reining in Cloris Leachman was always Jay Sandrich's job. And he did a brilliant job of it, particularly in this episode, where it slowly dawns on Phyllis that Lars is having an affair with Sue Ann Nivens, also known as the Happy Homemaker at WJM. Now, the character of Sue Ann Nivens was actually written in the script as a Betty White type. Okay? Betty White was a pioneer of television. She had a show in 1947. She was doing 5 hours live. Betty White was around forever. She was mostly daytime, though. She did have a couple sitcoms in the late 50s, but Betty White was on game shows. Betty White was always around, and she had this image of being this. Betty White said herself, a sickeningly sweet, naive, just kind of a goody two shoes type character.
Half of Sue Ann Nivens.
Sue Ann Nivens on the surface. And then anybody who knew Betty White knew that she had that wasn't who she was. She was very kind and very nice, yes. But she was also an incredibly intelligent woman. Her mind was so sharp and she had a biting sense of humor. So they created this character as a Betty White type, and they said to Mary, do you think Betty would do it? And Mary said, because Mary and Betty White were very good friends, well, why don't you ask her? I'm sure she'd rather be asked than not be asked and somebody else play it. And of course, Betty White said, yeah,
like who? Let's find a Betty White type. Who can we have as a Betty White type?
Exactly it. How about Betty White? Because Betty White was in almost every single taping with her husband, Alan Ludden, because they were very close to Mary and Grant Tinker. And she said, go ahead and ask her. So Ethel Wynant, who was a legendary casting person, basically said, would you mind coming in to read? And Betty White, being Betty White's like, sure, why not? Of course I will. And of course she was brilliant. So she was cast. So she called Mary Tyler Moore later that day and said, guess who's going to be on your show? And Mary, of course, said, oh, no. I don't really muddle much in my producer's affairs, but I can veto this. But of course she was thrilled because they were good friends. And so you have these two legendary characters, Phyllis Lindstrom and Sue Ann Nivens, going head to head over this simp that we never see named Lars. And it's just a wonderfully brilliant, genius episode. There are two scenes that I want to talk about. The first scene I want to talk about is the pie scene. Phyllis is now aware of the fact that Lars is having an affair. So she's trying to be a little bit more like Sue Ann, kind of like a happy homemaker. So she bakes a pie, something which is absolutely foreign to her. Hands that once touched the notes of Chopin, she says. This is what this woman's driven me to, baking a damn pie. And so they all take a bite of the pie. Mary pretends it's very good. She says, Rhoda will give me an honest opinion. Rhoda tastes it and goes, this is the best pie I ever had. And she goes, so I've become such an object of pity that even Rhoda is being kind to me.
Oh, I love that line.
It's the best, isn't it? And then she absentmindedly takes a bite of the pie. Phyllis does. And Cloris Leachman's face just runs the gamut of horror and disgust and confusion. It's a brilliantly acted scene. Wonderful scene. The second scene I want to talk about is the confrontation between Betty White and Cloris Leachman, between Sue Ann and Phyllis. And this is why I want to talk about it. First of all, it's a brilliantly written scene. Mm-hmm. They're on the set of the Happy Homemaker show. And Sue Ann is baking a souffle the entire time and is telling, like, Lou's making noise. She's like, please, I've got a Mr. Grant. She calls him Mr. Grant at this point. I've got a souffle in the oven, please. The slightest noise. And Phyllis wants to talk about what's going on. And Sue Ann's too interested in her souffle. So Phyllis takes the oven door and slams it shut. And of course, Sue Ann's horrified because her souffle is ruined. So she opens the oven door and pulls the souffle out and goes, "My poor baby," and then turns and knees the oven door closed. And that was an improvisation of Betty White.
Oh, it's beautiful the way she kicked up her knee. The audience went nuts.
The audience went nuts, and this is what's so brilliant. So when they were rehearsing it, they said it's a great scene, but the problem is there's this gaping hole between Phyllis and Sue Ann. How are we going to get this oven door closed? Because Phyllis isn't going to close the oven door, and Sue Ann's hands are full with her souffle. And Betty White, the genius Betty White, came up with that bit, which not only solved the problem of the oven door, but told you volumes about who Sue Ann Nivens was in that one brief kneeing of the door. Told you everything you needed to know about who Sue Ann Nivens was. So of course they brought her back. It was one of the greatest moments, I think, of that entire series.
And I'll tell you something else I loved about the show. It was a big moment to me for Mary. I mean, this may have happened before, but Mary had some guts in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
She put Sue Ann in her place.
I love that.
She said, "If you don't stop this affair, Ted's going to continue talking about it, and I will talk about it."
And you know what a big mouth Ted has.
Yeah, but the fact that she said, "I will talk about it, and you'll end up losing your job," I'm like, you go, Mary.
It's so true. Well, this is a little off tangent, so I'm just going to say it briefly, but one of the most fascinating things about the Mary Tyler Moore Show to me, and you really saw this because you watched all of the episodes at once, or close to at once, is the progression of the character of Mary Richards from this timid, unsure young girl to by the last season, she is a force. She is a strong, independent woman. So you see, and that's where Mary begins this progression of being more and more confident, more and more forceful. And I love that about the show. They grew. All the characters grew like real people.
Yeah, and a lot of people are upset in season 6 when she moved to the new apartment because we said it was because the house owners wouldn't let them take no new photos. I actually liked it. I think the problem with the first set was iconic.
Yes.
And everybody loved it. I wanted to live in Rhoda's place.
That's great.
Even, I remember Maurice going, "That's not even a studio." But I liked it because Mary...
She paid $85 a month.
Wow. Because Mary had become a producer at that point, so she'd moved up. She'd become much more sure of herself. I think the problem is that second set, I think it worked that she moved up. It didn't work because it wasn't memorable in any way.
No, it was pretty generic. It was a pretty generic set. But she got her own bedroom.
Yeah, she got her own bedroom. But it was a small studio apartment, or not a small apartment, but it was pretty small and it wasn't really interesting. I don't know. Have you watched the new Frasier, the reboot?
I have not. No.
You're not missing much. You're not missing much at all.
That's what I've heard.
But the living room in the old series is unforgettable.
Right.
The new one is very forgettable.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't believe they blew it. I think they got it right, but no, it's nothing like it. It won't be remembered like the old one.
No. Well, see, that's the thing. And that's yes, you have to show Mary Richards is becoming more successful. So eventually you got to move her out. Plus, Rhoda and Phyllis were both gone. So there was no reason for her to be at home, because if she was at home, then one of the characters from work would have to come. Because your two main characters who are part of the home set, for the first 4 seasons, there was the home stories and there were the office stories. And, melding them together was how you had to work. But you had to show that Mary was moving up and becoming more successful and getting her very own bedroom. And she says, "I'm so excited, my very own bedroom." And Sue Ann goes, "You think it's exciting? No, wait till you get a bed in there."
And of course, it ends with her saying she hates it. But anyway, we're getting off target.
So that's the Lars affair. Of course, it is ended happily. Lars stopped seeing Sue Ann Nivens, so Sue Ann can then concentrate full time on getting Lou in bed, which is a little tease for my next favorite. But we're moving on to Brad's next episode.
I want to say one more thing about why this episode bothers me, and it shouldn't because I got to think of the time.
Oh, okay.
What bothered me is the old, my husband, Jolene. I hate the song Jolene. You know what? Screw Jolene. What about your man?
Yes.
And that's the way I felt like this episode. Sue Ann never made a commitment to you. She's not wrong here. It's Lars.
Right.
Yet she wants to get Lars back. And I know, it's the same reason the movie The Woman drives me crazy. Granted, I know at that time period it was very realistic, but the fact that at the end she takes her husband back with open arms, and it bothered me, and I accept. But what year was this?
This was 1973.
Okay. That was the same year, I believe, that there was an episode with Mary and her parents, and Mary's mother is leaving and says to her husband, "Don't forget your pill." And he and Mary at the same time say, "I won't."
I won't, yes.
Wow, that was 1973.
That was really something for 1973.
That was huge. And they didn't discuss, the father just gave a look and they moved on. Very safe way to handle it.
Very safe, but so smart. Like the show always does, so smart. Yeah, I can see what you're saying, but you have to remember, this is not all women. This is Phyllis.
Yes, I know.
This is Phyllis, although for all of her progressive attitudes and women's lib attitudes, Phyllis is a conventional housewife.
Yeah.
You know what? She doesn't work outside the house. She's a mother. That's her life, her daughter and her husband. So she's insufferable. And you're kind of, I'm still happy that, you know, they come together at the end because he's going to die in a year anyway. Phyllis is going to go off on her own show. But I see what you're saying. You know, it's funny because this show, although we talk about this show as being iconic because of the single woman on her own, motif of it, it really was of its time. It didn't start it. It just kind of bled into the zeitgeist of it and then kind of became the torchbearer of it. Because if you think about it too, and Mary Tyler Moore said this many times, she's playing this single woman on her own, independent, and Mary Tyler Moore was anything but. Mary Tyler Moore depended very much on the men in her life, on Grant Tinker. In fact, she said she didn't become Mary Richards herself until 20 years after this, when she was actually living on her own and experiencing that. So I absolutely see what you're saying. I do. I think it's all part of the Phyllis character.
Yeah, and I forgive it because I know it's realistic. I'm not saying it just bothers me on a personal level. I totally forgive it. I think it's believable. Even today, I think there are women that would do that, but it still bothers me on a personal level. It hurts me.
It's just so wonderful. Yes. So brilliantly written. It's just one of my absolute favorites.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I will grant you that. It sounds like I didn't like it, and I absolutely did love it. So my first episode, like you, I had a problem because when we said, okay, let's each of us pick 2 episodes, I'm like, okay, my favorite episodes. And I'm like, do I really want my favorite episodes, or do I want episodes that really represent what this show is about? And really, they ended up being pretty much the same thing. So the episode I chose was from January 1974, season 4, episode 19, The Best of Enemies.
Oh, my heart.
And the reason I chose it is because I looked around and I kept looking at ones. I'm like, no, wait a minute. I need one that really shows Mary and Rhoda's friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I chose this. You know what? When I watched it again, I really realized it's not about Mary and Rhoda's friendship. It's Mary's relationship with everybody.
Yeah.
She spends more time with Lou than anyone else.
That's true. That's
so
true.
You get a lot of time with her and Lou, and Lou's discomfort with being emotional,
right?
And him trying his best and being hysterical, doing very poorly at it. It dealt with her and Murray, a very short period of time, but you had her and Murray as kind of the best buds from work,
right?
Equal kind of thing. And then you even had Ted, which I'll talk later about my feelings about Ted. But you had Ted come in at the end, and he acted very Ted. It was each of them had their part and played them as far as what their relationship was Mary very well. But what I love about Mary and Rhoda, unlike I'm sure there are shows I'm not thinking about in the past, but unlike any show, these were 2 real friends, like people I know.
Yeah.
You know, I know Lucy is great, but Lucy and Ethel were perfect at what they did, which was slapstick.
Well, I gotta disagree with you on that. There are moments of tenderness between Lucy and Ethel and I Love Lucy, which I think are very heartwarming. When they have a fight and they make up, it's very similar to when Mary and Rhoda make up. I'm just gonna say that.
But I will argue this a little bit. Now, maybe this is not every episode of I Love Lucy, but it has happened on I Love Lucy, and it has also happened on other sitcoms. You have the best friends that get into a big fight, and from that moment on, they act like they despise each other. Like they're the worst person on earth. And that didn't happen in this episode.
No, you're right.
Mary kept saying to people, it's all right. We'll work it out. She's distraught and she's heartbroken. But Rhoda never became, I got to tell you, she had every right to be angry. Rhoda was just plain wrong.
I was going to ask you, do you think Rhoda went too far?
Oh my God, yes. I was like I wanted to jump in and shake her to death.
So listener, what happens is that Rhoda divulges a secret that Mary lied on her job application at WJM, and she says it in front of the entire newsroom, and it upsets Mary, and Rhoda will not take it seriously. That Mary's actually upset. And that's what the fight is. Mary feels that Rhoda did betray Mary's confidence, and Rhoda won't take it seriously. She doesn't think she did anything wrong.
And that is the only thing I disliked about this episode, because first of all, Mary is trying to say, Rhoda, I'm busy with work.
Yes.
And she didn't seem self-centered. She seemed almost dumb.
Oh, oblivious.
She kept wanting to tell this story while Mary is just saying, give me a minute to finish my work here for a moment. And Rhoda won't stop. And then when Rhoda blurts it out, and then kept saying, nobody cares. Like, Lou, do you care that Mary lied on her job application? I was like, I was dumbfounded. And I'll tell you, part of the reason why is when I worked for Marriott, we had a guy who had lied on his application. He was one of our executives. He lied on it from years before about his college education. And they found that and fired him for it.
Wow.
They said they could not trust him based on that information. So maybe it hit a little more home to me than most people. Mm-hmm. But anyway,
I agree with you.
That set up the premise of the show, and I'll forgive it because it really led into the rest, which the rest of the show was fabulous. It's
such a... I'm so glad when you said you wanted to do this episode, because I love this episode so much. It would have been one of my choices had you not said it, because I think it's not only the depiction of this profound friendship that we've come to cherish these past 4 years, but it shows you how far these women have come. The fact that Mary, at the very last scene, Mary is not the one who apologizes. Rhoda does. Now, first season Mary would have apologized immediately. Just immediately, be like, I'm sorry, I'm overreacting, I'm sorry. No, she holds her ground.
She would apologize before she left the newsroom.
Rhoda, first season Rhoda, I don't think would have ever apologized. Would have ever said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. No. And that's what always moves me, is you're standing there watching them, that last scene, and they're dancing around their garbage and Rhoda's fake garbage. And you're like, who's going to say I'm sorry first? And it's Rhoda. And Mary immediately crumbles, which I think is so beautiful. I get teared up every single time I watch it.
And what's cute is I'm picturing, because Mary is in this scene, Mary is taking her garbage out. She steps out in the hallway, and Rhoda comes down the stairs with her bag of garbage, which she later admits is not garbage, it's makeup.
Fake garbage.
And I'm like, how long was Rhoda sitting on her steps up above waiting to hear Mary come out the door?
That's it. Exactly.
It's not even said, but you realize that must be what she was doing.
Yeah, because she's been, she's got how much she is, like $50. I don't know how much worth of makeup here that if I throw it out, I will lose that natural look. Which is so brilliant. But and it's so funny because you see the fact that they're both very distraught. But I just love the fact that it's Rhoda who recognizes that she was wrong, and Mary holds out. And we've all been in situations like that with people we're on the outs with, where you're like, but I'm right. And that can be really detrimental. But Mary was right. Rhoda went too far. And it's a beautiful resolution.
But back to what I was saying earlier, Mary was furious, had every right to be furious. She was also hurt in her heart because she loves Rhoda. Mm-hmm. And Georgette comes to the apartment because she's on her way to Rhoda's for dinner.
Ah, yes.
And Mary says, tell Rhoda I said hi. That is different than what you've seen in other sitcoms in the past.
Yes.
She's like, she wasn't a forgiven, but tell Rhoda I said hi.
Yeah. And did you get my hi back? Oh, she did. She went by and went, hello. Was that you? How about, since you brought up Georgette.
I love when Georgette goes up to Rhoda's apartment and tells her Mary said hi. And Rhoda said, well, tell her I said hi. And Georgette goes, oh, okay. And she goes running down.
She wants to leave.
For the front door.
Since you brought it up, you have to mention the fabulous analogy that Georgette makes that Rhoda and Mary.
And, you brought up you grew up in
Northwestern PA, yeah. Well, I went to
Northwestern
school
PA.
in Pittsburgh. I went to college in Pittsburgh.
I grew up in Greensburg. I lived for 2 years in Greensburg when I was in middle school.
I didn't know that.
30 miles east of Pittsburgh. And it was funny when she brought up that episode. It was actually Maurice and his mom and I all watching. And when she said, you and Mary are like Pittsburgh, Maurice went, what? And I said, oh my God, it's because of the Three Rivers. I knew immediately. And sure enough, it was because the Monongahela and the Allegheny. That's Rhoda and Mary. They come together to form the mighty
Ohio River.
Yes.
On their own,
Great
they're
analogy.
two little skinny rivers. But when they meet in Pittsburgh, well, they're the mighty Ohio River. And it's I love that analogy. Only Georgette would come up with that analogy. But it makes so much sense.
Exactly. That is so Georgette, because she comes across as this person that has a bean for a brain. But it took a lot of smarts to think that up.
How about when she says she doesn't think she could handle being Rhoda's best friend? She's too green. She wants to start with somebody easier first, and then maybe.
That's a lot of responsibility.
I don't think I can handle. Oh, Georgia Engel, another casting masterstroke. Just when the Phyllis and Rhoda were starting to make their way out, here comes Georgette to pick up the slack. She doesn't really pick up the slack, but what was brilliant about Georgia Engel and what was brilliant about the character was Georgette was Ted Knight was so unhappy with the way his character was because he was a constant butt of jokes. He just wanted something to make him more human, and Georgette came along. And suddenly he has dimension. He's not such a buffoon. He still says stupid things, but there's an empathy you now have for Ted. Eventually it grows more and more and more. And that's another brilliant way these writers showed this character progressions.
Well, he wanted to leave. He wanted to leave.
He did.
The show.
He was very upset.
And, I guess, I don't know if it was Brooks or one of the producers walked up and said something.
I think Grant Tinker had just walked him off the cliff about the character. And then James Brooks walked in and went, how's it feel to be America's favorite schmuck? And so he just went off the deep end again. But yeah, Georgia Engel, talk about unsung heroes. Oh, just a lovely, lovely performance.
Can I touch on my feelings about Ted Baxter?
Yeah, of course.
I have the same.
This is a Mary Tyler Moore podcast.
I have the same feelings I have about Ted Baxter as I did with Kramer on Seinfeld. I don't think either character should have been primary characters. I found them as primary characters irritating, but as just a walk-on, I found them hysterical.
Well, I think the writers were very judicious in what they gave Ted, particularly in the beginning. And I think that's what upset Ted Knight. But as Ted Knight grew in that role and it took on more dimension and he became more human, I think that Ted is one of the richest characters that has ever been on television. Now, would he be a lot to take like Cloris Leachman's Phyllis in his own series? Absolutely. Which is one of the reasons why Ted Knight had a difficult time after the Mary Tyler Moore Show. He did the Ted Knight Show, which failed, and then he finally kind of had a semi-hit with Too Close for Comfort. And then he died, the poor guy. He was only in his 60s. And which is why, because the essence of that character is a buffoon, unlikable. He's a supporting character. And it's hard to make them primary. So I understand what you're saying. I do. I totally get it.
And you probably know that Jack Cassidy was originally wanted for the role. And
he turned it down.
I can't picture him in that role at all. I know they brought him back as Ted's brother, and he wasn't such a buffoon. I cannot picture him in that role in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but the character as originally conceived was a Lyle Waggoner type character, a drop-dead, gorgeous anchorman that they thought Mary might have a romance with. And then Ted Knight came in and read it, and they were just like, this is the way to go. Because he's an older character, he has a certain amount of pathos, and that kind of, so you feel for this character as opposed to if he was this really handsome drop dead. I think Jennifer Aniston's father was almost going to get the part. He was on Days of Our Lives. And then Ted Knight came in and they're like, we have to give it to Ted Knight. He's just taking this character in a direction we never imagined. And it's beautiful.
John Aniston was a very handsome man.
He was. Well, that's what they thought of. And Ted Knight was a looker. Ted Knight was a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
It was a silver fox. But it was a different kind of, the idea of Mary and Ted having a serious romantic relationship is so cringeworthy.
Yeah.
Clearly, she felt that way, too, when he made the moves on her. But yeah, it's very funny. That's very funny.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you picked this episode. I love this episode for its emotion, for the sentiment, for that final scene. It's just so, like I said, I cry every time.
There was a lot of emotion. There was love and friendship in the beginning. There was hurt. There was anger. There was frustration. There was discomfort, and then back in love again.
Yeah.
It really ran the gamut.
It really did.
It certainly gave Mary Tyler Moore her run for her money.
No, and Mary Tyler Moore won 2 Emmys this season. 2.
Oh, did she really?
She won Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy. And they had this other award, Actress of the Year, that they only gave away twice. Her year and the following year, and she won both of them. Isn't that great? She deserved them. She deserves all the Emmys she got. Every single Emmy.
Oh, she did.
Every single one.
Didn't the show win like 23 Emmys total?
Yes, it held the record for a while until Cheers blew it out of the water. But Cheers was on for what, 10 years? Mary Tyler Moore was on for 7, so...
Well, let's get on to my second episode.
Yes.
This was the next year, or the next season. Season 5, episode 9. It was in August of 74. Not a Christmas Story.
And can I tell you, again, I think one of the funniest, just laugh out loud funny episodes ever.
Oh my God, yes. I chose it because I remembered it as being hysterically funny. And when I watched it again before I told you, I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. Because, again, it's not only funny, every character in that show has almost equal footing.
Yeah.
They all get almost the same amount of airtime. Not entirely, but almost.
True ensemble piece.
And it really shows... You know, they were silly and they absurd in their arguments, but they were still very realistic. You believe these people are who they are. And you believe in their love and their hate for each other at the same time.
What I love about this episode is it hinges on the smallest little detail. The placement of 2 words. How many arguments do you have with people that get blown way out of proportion over something as silly and simple as a misplaced word, a misunderstanding? I love it. I love it. That something so simple blows up.
It's silly and simple, but it's also believable because Murray takes pride in his writing.
Exactly.
And the fact that Ted switched that one word was enough that makes it believable that Murray was so upset. And let's hear what the story is Murray writes a new opening for the show, and Ted likes it at first and then wants to just change the words around. Murray doesn't want him to. Mary finally says, no, Ted, do it the way Murray says. And of course, Ted goes on the air and does it the way he wants to. Murray's mad at Mary for not being firm enough. Of course, he's pissed off at Ted. Luke comes in and it ends up all of them arguing and fighting in the newsroom. And this is the same time that there's a big snowstorm that hits Minneapolis, which, never happens.
Never.
They had like 16 inches of snow and they're snowed in. And what does Sue Ann have?
Sue Ann is taping her Christmas special because she likes to spend the holidays with her only sister in Florida. She's kind of a creep, but she has a pool.
I love that line. That was so Sue. And she says it with this big smile and her dimples.
She's kind of a creep, but she has a pool.
So Sue Ann has taped her Christmas show. It's in Thanksgiving, which is why this is called Not a Christmas Episode or whatever.
Yeah.
But Sue Ann is taping her Christmas show for her cooking show or homemaker show a month ahead of time. So because they're all snowed in, they all go downstairs. And I wish I could remember the name of the show because it was so silly.
Wasn't it Christmases from Around the World? Something like that.
But it was something. Yeah, it was something.
Yuletide Yummies for Worldwide Tummies.
That's it. Yeah,
that's
it.
I
can't believe you remember it. Worldwide Yummies.
Yuletide Yummies for Worldwide Tummies.
So of course she has this huge feast, and they all go down to eat this great food, but they're all still really pissed at each other. And so they're at the table waiting for Sue Ann to finish cooking, and Georgetta's helping her. And Sue Ann insists they sing Christmas songs.
But you missed the great gag of the hat. They all had to wear hats.
Oh, the hats. Yes.
They all had to wear hats from their different countries. Yes. And what was Mary's hat? Which is one of the funniest side gags.
Mary was a Kaiser, the German helmet with
the steel spike.
The spike on the top. Because I saw her holding it, and I'm like, is she really going to put that on her head?
Mary Richards sitting there with a Kaiser's helmet. And Lou has a sombrero. Murray has some strange kind of bowler thing. Ted's got a Russian thing on, right? He's got like a big blue. Yes. It's
And Georgette had a Scottish thing.
When the camera.
Sue-Ann had a thing from Holland.
She's a little Dutch girl.
Yeah.
I'm a little Dutch girl.
And they don't want to wear the hats, but of course Sue-Ann threatens them not to feed them if they don't wear the hats. So they all put their hats on.
Yes. They all put their hats on, and the camera slowly does a pan of all of them down across the table, and it is so funny.
The looks on their faces are priceless.
Oh, it's such a great scene.
So they are told to sing the 12 Days of Christmas, which each of them gets one line as they go. So it starts with
Murray.
The first day of Christmas.
A partridge in a pear tree.
And Ted is next. Two turtle doves.
Yeah.
Is Lou is three French
Lou's
hens?
next.
Three French hens.
Lou is three French hens.
Mary's
four lords leaping
birds.
is Mary. Because Sue-Ann is five golden rings.
No, Sue-Ann is 5 golden rings. Much better than that, but she was that high pitched, just like an angel.
Like an angel.
So the other of them are like ready to scream bestial their words. And Suzanne's
5 golden rings. Yes, it's just
or Sue-Ann. I keep calling her Suzanne. I had a boss named Suzanne.
So perfect.
Yeah, and this whole thing just continues. And
even after Georgette, they're still being angry with each other and antagonistic, and Georgette starts to sing Silent Night.
Oh, and that is what's priceless about this show. It is what makes it different than other sitcoms past.
That is what's priceless.
So they're all angry. The whole table's fuming. And George breaks into Silent Night. And they all slowly start joining in, and the whole group is singing Silent Night together.
No.
I thought they all did.
Jordan, no, they don't. She sings the whole song all the way through, all by herself, and they just sit there with these looks on their faces of sadness and like, oh my God, what have we done?
Yes.
And Mary says, after she's done singing the entire chorus of Silent Night, Mary says, did anyone remember why we were mad at each other? And they go, I do. Yeah, I sure do too.
Yes, and they all broke back. And it's like perfect because most other poorly written sitcoms would have ended there with all of them. It
was because you thought it would have been that would have melted their hearts.
Yeah.
Silent Night would have melted their hearts and been like, but she goes, does anyone remember why we were mad? And Murray goes, well, I do. I do too. But of course, by the end, they're all friends again. During the commercial break, they made up, they ate, their blood sugar returned to its normal levels. And they sing "Deck the Halls" at the end. To me, it's like it is such a fantastic Christmas show.
Yes, it's perfect.
It's wonderful.
I liked the fact that it wasn't a Christmas show. I like the fact that it showed every character, and I like the fact on top of that is just damn funny.
It is. I think it is one of the laugh out loud funniest episodes ever.
And now Tony's going to talk about an episode that they built up to for years. When Tony and I said, let's pick 4 episodes, we both almost simultaneously said, not Chuckles the Clown. Because it's so overdone.
Exactly.
And I think we agreed.
It is. I agree. You know what? And I give Chuckles all the props. It is a brilliant episode. It is a brilliantly written episode. It deserves all the hosannas, all of the praise it gets as the greatest episode of all time. It's usually near the top if it's not number 1. However, it's like you have that one child who's constantly heralded and all these other kids who are so gifted and so funny. It's like, no, we don't need to talk about Chuckles Bites the Dust. We need to talk about these other episodes, which are just as brilliant and have other things going on with them.
I think more so. I like Chuckles the Clown, but it is so hyped. It's one of the best episodes of television ever.
It is.
And I watched it and like, it's funny. I didn't like it because my expectations were so high. After I calmed down, I'm like, no, it is funny. But I think there are so many shows that are, and Mary Tyler Moore alone, that are so much better. So I'm glad we chose not to go that route.
It is overhyped. I agree with you. I love it. I think it is because of the final scene, because Mary Tyler Moore is comedy genius in that last scene when she's trying not to laugh. And, people get... I love Mary Tyler Moore so much, and it was so sad when we lost her. But talk about a brilliant actress. A brilliant actress. As much as I love Lucy, and God knows I love Lucy, comic genius, Mary Tyler Moore was another level as well of acting. All you gotta do is watch Ordinary People, and you're like, what? Huh? What? But you see it there the whole time when she's Mary Richards. I mean, I don't want to go off into an Ordinary People tangent. Maybe we can talk about that sometime. But that last scene of Chuckles, that's so hard to do. Mm-hmm. It is so hard to laugh and not laugh when you're acting. Believe me, I've tried it. It ain't easy. She does it. She makes it look effortless. And I think that's one of the reasons why Chuckles gets the praise it does, is because Mary Tyler Moore's performance is off the charts.
I agree.
In that last scene, in that final scene.
I agree.
But our last episode is not Chuckles Bites the Dust. But I was leading up to it with the Lars affair, kind of the natural through line, because my final episode pick, or my second episode pick, is from 1976, January 17th, 1976. And the title of it is Once I Had a Secret Love. Did you know what episode I was talking about when I said I wanted to do this one, Brad?
I didn't know the name of the episode, but I was guessing it was either this one or the one where they go into Suzanne's bedroom, which is hysterical. I knew it was one of those two.
Yes, this is the one where finally, after years of foreplay, Lou and Sue-Ann spend the night together. And Lou comes to the office in the morning and is horrified about what's happened. It was directed by Jay Sandrich again, and it was written by Pat Nardo and Gloria Banta, two of the many female writers on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. God bless.
Can I say something about them real quick?
Please.
When I watched that episode, I think it was either when it was starting or when it was closing, I saw Pat Nardo's name, and I thought, that's not a very common name. That's the same name as Elaine Nardo on Taxi.
Exactly.
And as it was fading out, I saw Banta.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait a minute, Tony Banta, Elaine Nardo. So I quickly went over to Taxi to find out, yes, indeed, that's where they got their names from.
It's exactly it. It's exactly because it's MTM production.
Yeah, yes. I had no clue. And it's funny that those just jumped out of me just as I was ending this whole thing, wrapping up or watching these shows.
It's wonderful. Yes. Those characters were suggested by these two writers' names that are on Taxi, because MTM production. So what happens in this episode is, as I said, Sue-Ann and Lou finally hook up. Lou was drunk, clearly, and is horrified by what happens. And he has to tell Mary, he has to tell somebody what's happened, because everybody obviously knows. Ted comes in and goes, "Get out! Lou is on his way and he's on a rampage," because it's just, that's horrible thing has happened.
He shoved my head into a mailbox.
That's right. And Lou wants Mary to get rid of all the liquor. No liquor in this office. And she goes to put in the wastebasket, and he says, "That's the first place I'll look." It's just the idea that a man would openly drink in an office is so 70s. I can't even believe it. But here's what I love about this episode. Yes, it is a very funny episode. Once Mary realizes it's Sue-Ann that Lou spent the night with, because Lou doesn't tell her. Lou is like he had a situation with a woman and he woke up at her house, but he won't tell her who because he's so horrified. And he only finds out because Sue-Ann has slipped a note inside his jacket. And he goes to pull out his handkerchief, I think, and the note falls out, and Mary's wringing it over his shoulder. And she says, "I don't know who wrote it. All I noticed is that they dot their I's with little hearts like Sue-Ann." Oh, and the secret is out. And so you think that's what the episode's about. And this is why I love this episode. But that's just a small kernel of it. What this episode is really about is Lou swears Mary to secrecy, never to tell. And Murray, of course, knows something is going on, and he takes Mary home that night. He drives her home, and he's badgering her to tell him what's going on. And Mary says, no. And she goes, I will tell you, but you can't tell anyone. And she tells Murray. Well, the next day in the office, it comes out, and Lou finds out that Mary has betrayed his confidence. And that's what this episode is really about. It's about the relationship between Mary and Lou. Because the thing with Sue-Ann is taken care of. He buys her, I think, like 3 lunches and a dinner, and she's fine with that. She doesn't think it's fine. It's about this breach of trust between them, kind of a little bit like The Best of Enemies, only much more profound. Between Lou.
It's painful.
It's painful. And Mary, it's gut-wrenching is what it is, because Lou ain't kidding around. And here's the amazing thing about Edward Asner. You know, Edward Asner was a very good, when he had never really done comedy much when they hired him, and they had their doubts about him because he was such a strong dramatic actor. And you see why. In this scene, when he says to Mary, you know, you'll still work here. It doesn't affect our work. We're just not friends anymore. And he gets very quiet. And it's, you know, you're like, oh my God. And Mary's a basket case, of course. It's so moving. And I guess when they were originally rehearsing it, he was punching that up too much. And Jay Sandrich said to him, make it quiet. And you get the guts of that. We're just not friends anymore. It's such a moment of like, you take your breath back. You're like, oh my God.
And it feels real. It
so
hits you
real.
in the stomach when he says it.
It does. It's a total gut punch. And you're like, how is this possible? You know what I mean? But I mean, we've all been there. We've all done something or had something done to us, felt betrayed by a friend, or accidentally betrayed a friend, or maybe not accidentally betrayed a friend. And you realize the repercussions of what you've done are so much more severe than you thought. And it's terrifying.
And what makes it so believable is part of what you said. He said, you know, we'll continue working together. I still respect you for your job.
Yeah.
We just won't be friends. So it's great that he added those in there.
Yeah.
Like, we are now professionals. This is it.
That's it.
Friendship over.
Friendship is over.
And she is so distraught. But I got to tell you, what really caught me, first of all, impressed me, when Mary found out that it was that Lou had sex with Suzanne, right? When she realized the heart over the eyes.
Right.
She busted out laughing. I'm like, Mary has grown up. Because yes. Mary, when your friend does stupid things and it's funny.
Yes.
And you laugh, but old Mary would not have done that.
No.
And here she's like, oh my God, you did this. And she's laughing in his face. And I liked that. Because that was also a change in Mary.
Yes, well, it's such a progression of character and of their relationship. These two are so close now.
Yes.
That she's the one that he turns to tell her this horrible story, and she betrays that confidence. Mm-hmm. How horrible! What you're right. What a gut punch for both of them.
And she was wrong for telling Murray, and I wanted to slap Murray when he let Lou know.
Well, yeah, it was really Murray's fault. I mean, Murray should have kept his big mouth shut. But you can see why, because Murray was trying to make Lou feel better. Because Lou's like, when Sue-Ann comes up and gives Lou his socks that she's freshly laundered, Ted can't get it. Ted doesn't understand what's happened. But Murray's not stupid. He knows it. So he's trying to make Lou feel like it's okay. But he does the exact wrong thing. And then it comes back to bite Mary in the ass. And, speaking of brilliance, Mary Tyler Moore, what was she most famous for on the Dick Van Dyke Show was her crying. Was her, oh, Rob.
Oh, Rob.
And so she does that in this episode. But it has just enough reality that it's really, really sad. It's really, again, it's just gut-wrenching, the emotion and the sadness, because you believe this could really be true. They really could. But what makes it even more special is how she brings him out of it. She says, I betrayed a secret that you told me. The only way to make this better is for me to tell you something that happened to me, and you can tell anybody you want. A man came into town. I'd only met him, never met him before, never saw him again. And we had same situation that you had with Sue-Ann. And that man's name was Walter Cronkite. And Lou looks at her and she goes, Roger Mudd. And it's just so brilliant. And the fact that she's like, if you smile, it means we're friends again. If you smile. And that's how she gets him around. And that hug they have at the end, when he smiles and he looks at her and he just shakes his head, and they have that. I mean, it's like a bear hug. It's an embrace. Mm-hmm. You feel the emotion of that.
Well, I don't think Ed Asner can give anything but a bear hug.
Well, that's true. That's true. But you get such a sense of this deep relationship, this deep love they have for each other. I mean, we're talking about sitcom characters here, okay? Yeah. And as if we're talking about Tolstoy. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's the way they are. I relate to them that way. The depth of their characterizations, the depth of their emotions, to me, is so profound. And when you've lived with these characters for so many years, and you're with them in all of these trials and tribulations they have, you're right there with her, saying, we're not friends anymore. I mean, that relief when he smiles is palpable. It is to me.
Yeah, this is the point where we watch the episode when they very first meet, and they've now been our friends for 6 years.
Yeah.
And the beauty of this episode, first of all, it's very funny, but also you mentioned Mary and her crying, and I mentioned her laughing, and it really shows her abilities. But to me, it really made Ed Asner shine. Because the gruff guy with the soft, gooey interior, that's been done a million times before Mary Tyler Moore. It's been a million times after Mary Tyler Moore. It would normally be cliche, but because of Ed Asner,
yes, it
doesn't feel cliche.
No. There's a reason, yes.
He is gruff and grumble. And when he gets that smile on his face, he's like the most warm, lovable guy you ever saw. And it comes naturally, both of them.
The heft he brings to these scenes shows what an incredible dramatic actor he was. Now, it's no mistake, and it's no accident that after the Mary Tyler Moore Show ended and he spun off into Lou Grant was a drama. It was not a situation comedy anymore, because this man was a very accomplished dramatic actor, and you get that so much, especially when he says we're not friends anymore. Oh my God, it gives me chills when he says that every single time. And they talk about other shows that have kind of danced the line of comedy and drama, and I don't think Mary Tyler Moore gets enough credit for that, because Mary Tyler Moore does too. This is comedy with drama. It's not Hamlet size, but to these people it is, because it's their lives. It's the everyday dramas, which can be just as devastating and just as precarious as the great epic dramas that we're used to. So I think it's so beautifully done. So beautifully done.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it is as well. But I did read an article, and I wish I saved the information, and hopefully you'll know more about this. They did do an episode where Mary has a friend who ends up being racist and doesn't want to be around Rhoda or something of that nature, and because Rhoda's Jewish. And when the episode was done, everybody felt like it failed. Yeah. Because they said, you know what? We're not all in the family.
Exactly.
We're not Maude.
Right. Yes, that's exactly true.
Am I right there? I wanted to say more information, and I lost it.
Well, yes. No, that's exactly what happened. This woman hits Mary in her car, and they become friends, and Rhoda gets a little jealous, and they're playing tennis at a country club, and Rhoda can't go to the country club because they don't let Jews in. And Mary's horrified by this, that her friend is a racist, and you're absolutely right. They realized after they did it that this was not, they weren't all in the family. They weren't Norman Lear. Let Norman Lear do these topical subjects. We're about character. We're about relationships. That's where our drama comes in. And we do it better than anybody. And boy, did they ever. And here's something really interesting, and this is just me personally, but maybe other people. I find it very difficult to watch All in the Family and Maude in many Norman Lear shows now, because it's so of its time. I can watch Mary Tyler Moore Show 50 years from now if I'm still alive at age 32. I'm backwards aging. I could watch Mary Tyler Moore anytime, because it's about character. There's not, yes, the 70s styles, and there are references to Nixon and things like that, but it's all about character. It's all about truth and character.
Yeah, that, like you said, the Mary shag carpeting. Oh my God, I'll never forget her yellow and something striped outfit that she wears when she's crossing the street in the opening. Oh my goodness.
Those fabulous pantsuits.
Yes, and she, they reference Walter Cronkite a lot, Johnny Carson, et cetera, et cetera. But the show, when it comes down to it, is all about friendships.
Yes, relationships.
And relationships.
Character.
And that's why this show will go on forever. All in the Family, I will tell you, All in the Family, I was 7 when it came out, maybe younger. And I was instantly an All in the Family fan. Now,
me too.
If you look at my bio, it says I was a fan of Doonesbury way younger than I should have been. I was very politically motivated in my head. I was like a sitcom kid, like almost like Michael on Good Times. And so I was like, oh my God. And I was cheering Michael on because, Archie was such a racist and blah, blah, blah. And he was such a conservative, and I was such a flaming liberal. And I still like the show. And there's certain episodes I love, but I, like you, when I go back, sometimes it's so hard to watch. Not just because there's a lot of that show that just doesn't cut it anymore, because there's so much, it's so topical.
Right.
But the yelling and the screaming all the time is like, part of it is I lived in that household for a while, but it's funny for a while, but come on.
I love it. I can watch it now. I watch it for the performances. I watch it for Carol O'Connor, and I watch it for Gene Stapleton, because their characterizations are unbelievable. So that's the only thing I focus on, is the characters.
We're going to hit on All in the Family, and we are definitely going to do the episode where Edith loses her faith.
Oh my God! Yes.
Beverly LaSalle dies.
Yes.
Did she win an Emmy for that? She should have.
She won. She and Mary Tyler Moore toggled back and forth with Emmys throughout the runs of their show. As All in the Family, All in the Family was #1.
Yeah.
For 5 years. Mary Tyler Moore was always kind of it was always in the top, well, it wasn't always in the top 20, but it kind of straddled the top 10, top 20 for its prime years, which I believe begins with A Lars Affair and ends with the season of Once I Had a Secret Love, the 6th season. The 7th season, there's a couple episodes which are a little, they're still brilliant. It's Mary Tyler Moore show, but they're a little shaky. So during its great, great years, I would say 4 through 6, maybe even 3 through 6. It still wasn't #1. All in the Family was always.
Yeah, it was never #1. And it actually dropped from, I think, like 26 to, I could be wrong, the number's 26 to 40. I know it dropped 20 down.
What, Mary Tyler Moore?
Well,
you know why? Because of the Family Viewing Hour. Because in 1975, suddenly the conservatives took over again. After these brilliant years of sophisticated, intelligent television, the conservatives took over again and instituted the Family Viewing Hour, and they had to move all these shows. So suddenly this great Saturday night lineup was gone. All in the Family, I think, moved to Mondays. They moved Mary Tyler Moore, I think, to Tuesday, or maybe they moved it to earlier. And it lost its birth. And that's why. Plus, it was also, they were very smart to know it was time to go. They were very smart to do that. There's some great episodes in the last year. When Georgette has her baby, fantastic episode. I love that episode. I love Mary's insomnia when she's in the bathtub. And they all coming into her bathroom. It's such a great episode. I'm in the bathtub, naked. But yeah, I think that All in the Family, I would love to do an All in the Family episode, and because there's a lot to say about All in the Family, as there is to say about the Mary Tyler Moore show, which we've done.
we could do more and more. I do want to add
so much.
Bring up one thing before we go, though, because it's something that it kind of drives me crazy, and I'm disappointed in. We mentioned that they didn't want Mary to be divorced because they were worried that people would think that she divorced Rob Petrie, which is so stupid. So asinine. The audience isn't that stupid.
Well,
at the same time, when Lou Grant started, it was a big move to move him from a comedy to have the same character go to a drama. Now, they softened him up a little bit, especially over time. He became pretty liberal for Lou.
So as did Edward Asner. Ed Asner became a feminist.
Yeah, so did Edward Asner. I don't know if he personally changed, but he became outspoken at least. But that was a big transition. But they wanted to make sure that Lou Grant stood on its own, so they rarely, if ever, mentioned anything about the Mary Tyler Moore show.
Yeah.
In fact, the only thing I know that was a connection is Mary's aunt from the TV series, from the Mary Tyler Moore show.
Yes, Eileen Heckert.
Ended up on Lou Grant. I don't even remember that woman. I know she was on several episodes.
Mary's Aunt Flo. Mary Tyler Moore had an aunt who was a journalist, so she was based on Mary Tyler Moore's real aunt, and that was played by the brilliant actress Eileen Heckert, Oscar-winning actress, who is one of your favorite movies, The Bad Seed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she plays the drunk in The Bad Seed, the mother who's
my goodness,
Rhoda's first victim. Yeah.
Oh my!
I can't think of her name. I can't think of what her name is in The Bad Seed, but yeah, Eileen Heckert, Aunt Flo. She was on Lou Grant, but you're right.
But other than that, they tried not to. They didn't want to touch on it because they wanted to make sure. And at some point, I would have liked. They didn't have to have somebody come in and visit.
Right.
But just have them say, "Well, nice talking to Mary," or just refer back to something, just to make that connection. But they did the same thing with Mary and Rhoda, and I don't want to get too much into Mary and Rhoda because it's painful to watch.
Oh, the movie, yeah.
Yeah, it was for those that don't know, it was a TV movie made in 2000. In 2019, they wanted to bring Rhoda and Mary back with their own sitcom.
Right.
And the network said, let's do 13 episodes. And they didn't like the pilot, so they scrapped it. So instead, they took the premise and made it into a TV movie with the possibility, if it goes well, maybe we'll make a show. And it's really bad. Mary and Rhoda meet in New York. Mary's a widow and Rhoda's divorced for a second time, and they end up living together because they don't need money. They need money. But anyway, in that movie, they purposely did the same thing. They didn't mention, because they had been apart. They actually had been separated and angry with each other for whatever reason. I don't think we ever find out why. So they're reuniting. They're having a reunion. And there's not a, have you talked to Ted?
Yeah.
Or how's Georgette doing? None of that.
I know. It's so sad.
And I heard Cloris Leachman was actually very angry.
Really? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that she felt she should have been a part of that. I think everybody knows that Rhoda and Mary were closer than
well, Phyllis forgot to pick Rhoda up from her wedding, which reminds me we have to do a Rhoda episode too, because we have to talk about Rhoda's wedding.
Oh, Rhoda, the great show that had a very quick spiraling downfall.
Oh, God.
It's so bright the first season.
It's so brilliant. So brilliant.
So it blows my mind that they felt it was necessary that people wouldn't be able to make those disconnects.
Yeah. I guess I'm kind of glad that Hot in Cleveland happened, that they were actually able to have all of the characters I mean, that show became, stunt casting 101. But to have almost every, except for God bless Ted Knight, who was gone, almost every character from the Mary Tyler Moore Show appear on Hot in Cleveland was really wonderful. And you had that moment of them all together, which I think is, God bless Mary Tyler Moore, was not doing well. It's painful to see her in such pain. But I agree. I see what you're saying. It's kind of weird. It's like you just not negated, but acknowledge your past.
It's just very odd.
I was never a big fan of Lou Grant. I liked it. I appreciated it, but it wasn't my cup of tea.
I enjoyed it because it dealt with a lot of political topics. And as I said, I was this kid that was really into politics, but I saw it as a separate show. I mean,
yeah, totally. I think that was their plan too. I mean, they just didn't want,
especially because he quickly very softened up. Maybe half the first season, I'd say at most he was gruff, and even if that.
Talk about a character trajectory. Yeah. Well, this was beyond fun. I hope everybody else had as much fun listening to us as we did talking about it.
Well, you said we could do many episodes of Wizard of Oz. I think we could do 20 on Mary Tyler Moore.
Oh, well, like I said, I can't pick my favorite child out of 24. I mean, It's so... Honorable mentions, My Brother's Keeper, the first time a gay character was treated with respect and dignity on a sitcom, and it was Mary Tyler Moore. Thank you, Norman Lear. It was Mary Tyler Moore who did it.
Yes.
With Phyllis's brother. Put on the Happy Face, where Mary Tyler Moore has a very, very bad week, which is brilliant. Ted and Georgette's Wedding. I mean, we could go on and on and on. It's just wonderful, wonderful shows.
Yep. I think spinning off Rhoda was a good idea, and I think it was a horrible idea because it really changed.
We'll do an episode on Rhoda's Wedding, and we'll talk all about
We'll talk about when we talk about Rhoda. Well, thank you for suggesting this episode.
Thank you. Thank you for your suggestions, too. I had a ball. I can't wait to do it again.
It was a lot of fun.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, and you know what? We need you remember Siskel and Ebert when they were done, they would say, "Save us the aisle seat."
Yeah, we need the catchphrase.
Somebody come up with a catchphrase for us.
Good, because I can't.
I can't think of anything. So we were always like, let's end it. So help us out. Send us a catchphrase.
I'll think of a really good movie line we can use.
There we go.
Bye, everybody.
That's all, folks.